Welcome to the Redhead Reveal podcast. I am Jenn Pinkerton, your Redhead host, a psychotherapist, high-performance coach, writer, and speaker. As a connection expert, I help people reveal their connectedness within relationships, transforming from the root causes of beliefs and behaviors that hold them back from thriving in life. Let's talk about how you're thriving. Today, we're going to talk about Make Love Not Porn. It's a social sex tech platform, an alternative to hardcore pornography that has a social and sexual education component to it. It's pretty interesting, and I learned a lot. You will too. All right, I'm excited today to welcome Cindy Gallop to the podcast. Cindy is the author of Make Love Not Porn, Technology's Hardcore Impact on Human Behavior. This is a social sex tech platform, right? Cindy, tell us all about it. I'm excited to learn.
Sure. Thank you, Jen. So I'm thrilled to be here. And I have to tell you that Make Love Not Porn was kind of an accident. And by the way, everything in my life and career has always happened by accident. I've never consciously, intentionally planned anything. I used to work in advertising, and my ex-boss at the agency I worked at, BBH, Sir John Hegarty, has this great mantra: do interesting things and interesting things will happen to you. So that's very much how I live my life.
I agree. That's wonderful.
So I guess the interesting thing I was doing in this context is I date younger men. They tend to be in their 20s. Mm-hmm. And about, 17 years ago now, I began realizing through dating younger men that I was encountering what happens when two things converge. And I stress the dual convergence because most people think it's only one thing. I realized that I was experiencing what happens when today's total freedom of access to hardcore porn online meets our society's equally total reluctance to talk openly and honestly about sex. When those two factors converge, porn becomes sex education by default in not a good way.
Okay, I want to say that one more time because that was so profound, and I want to make certain that my listeners and viewers got that. Give me that convergence one more time.
Sure. So what I was experiencing was basically what happens when today's total freedom of access to hardcore pornography online meets our society's equally total reluctance to talk openly and honestly about sex.
Wow, that is big. Okay. And I always say we shouldn't even be having sex if we can't talk about sex. So I'm right with you on this.
Excellent. So basically, I found myself encountering a number of sexual behavioral memes in bed. I went, whoa, I know where that behavior is coming from. I thought, wow, if I'm experiencing this, other people must be as well. I didn't know that, Jen, because 16 years ago, nobody was talking about this. Nobody was writing about it. This was me in isolation as a naturally action-oriented person going, I'm going to do something about this. So 15 years ago, purely as a side venture, I put up on no money a tiny clunky website at makelovenotporn.com. Mm-hmm. That in its original version was kind of a public service announcement.
Okay.
Porn world versus real world. Here's what happens in the porn world. Here's what really happens in the real world. I launched at a TED conference in 2009. I became the only TED speaker to say the words, "come on my face," on the TED stage 6 times.
What a wonderful legacy to leave, Cindy.
Absolutely. The talk went viral, as you can probably imagine.
Of course it did.
And it drove this extraordinary global response to my tiny website that I had never anticipated. Thousands of people wrote to me from all around the world. Young and old, men and female, straight and gay. I realized I'd uncovered a huge global social issue. Mm-hmm. And so that was when I went, oh my God, I now have a personal responsibility. I have to take Make Love Not Porn forwards in a way that will make it much more helpful and effective. Mm-hmm. And so I turned it into what it is today, which the way to think about us is, if porn is the Hollywood blockbuster movie, Make Love Not Porn is the badly needed documentary. We are a unique window onto the funny, messy, loving, wonderful ways we all have sex in the real world. And what we're doing is we are socializing, normalizing, and destigmatizing sex, bringing it out of the shadows into the sunlight to promote consent, communication, good sexual values and behavior. We are literally sex education through real world demonstration.
I love that, because there is really this big disconnect, I think, from people who want to be and have a desire to be sexually open and curious and all those things, but do still feel that stigma for doing so, do still struggle with how can I balance that? And I think that balance is oftentimes a real big barrier to getting to a point of true sexual freedom.
No, absolutely, Jen. And I have to tell you, as I was saying, Make Love Not Porn was an accident. As the saying goes, the path appeared. But what that means is that every day for the past 15 years, I have seen up close the enormous human misery and unhappiness caused by the shame, guilt, and embarrassment with which we imbue sex. And so that's why, I talk about Make Love Not Porn as a shame changer. Because as I said, we are out to normalize, the single area of universal human experience we are all most engaged with, most fascinated by, and most messed up about.
And I agree with that, especially the most messed up about part. As a sex therapist, sex educator, and someone who talks about sex completely openly and encourages that, I am often met with such a big stumbling block with people where their desire is there. I do fundamentally believe that most people would love to have this beautiful sex life that they think is only something they can dream of. And not understanding that I believe that that is within everyone's reach, but it requires the communication. It requires the comfort and, of course, consent, as you're referring to as well. But it's the barrier, I think, that just is not, I don't see how that comes down without someone being groundbreaking as you are to really address the shame. Because I think that such comes from trauma, comes from attachment wounds, comes from societal concerns, so many different ways people sit with a place of shame regarding the concept of sex in general.
No, absolutely, Jen. And what is really interesting is, as I say, I kind of stumbled into what I'm doing, and the world responded. We are literally the startup the world asked for. And so I talk about Make Love Not Porn as a social experiment. We're putting this platform out there. We don't dictate what real world sex is. You, our community, you, the world, show us. We are answering the question that everyone has asked since the dawn of time, which is, what is everybody else really doing in bed? And now we're showing you. But what is so interesting is that as a unique business, Make Love Not Porn has a unique capability. We've discovered we have the power to change people's sexual attitudes and behavior for the better in a way that few other things can. And so in the 11 years we've operated as a business, we've taught countless young people that porn is not sex in the real world. Gen Z loves us. We have saved numerous marriages and relationships. And that's literally how people write to us, you saved my marriage. We've inspired communications breakthroughs between couples. Parents are buying their teenage and 20-something children subscriptions to Make Love Not Porn because they tell us, I want my kids to see what happy, healthy, loving sexual relationships actually look like. And, what is interesting is that as with any disruptive technology, use cases emerge the founder never dreamt of. So I was blown away when we began hearing from survivors of rape, sexual assault, sexual abuse, and we hear from female survivors, male, trans, non-binary survivors. They tell us that Make Love Not Porn help them reclaim their bodies. We help them feel able to be sexual again post-trauma in a situation where porn is too triggering. And it's not just people who watch our videos. We have a number of Make Love Not Porn stars, as we call our contributors, who tell us being able to share themselves sexually in a completely safe and trustworthy space has helped them process and heal from sexual trauma. I never thought of that when I came up with this idea, and I'm so grateful that that is the effect it can have.
It makes a lot of sense to me from like a trauma-informed way when you think about the healing that goes on to feel in control of that, to feel as though that you're not going to be held back from that, and what hurt you, we can actually find our way through on the other side to be able to process the feelings, the emotions, the fears, the stigma, and the shame around it. And, there is so much growth opportunity to be done when we began that healing process. And I think when people who have been victims of sexual assault or sexual trauma can actually get to a place to have a beautiful sex life, it makes me so glad to see people healing in that way. And if you have provided this beautiful avenue for healing, I'm in such support of that.
No, I completely concur, Jenna, and we are thrilled that many sex therapists have told us that we are an invaluable professional resource that they use and encourage their clients to use. And again, I never thought of that originally when coming up with this idea, but I am so happy that is the case.
And I just have heard so many positive things about it. I was so excited to get you to come here and talk about it because it's very different. What you're doing is very different than what is already out there. It's interesting. I'd love to know kind of how has it grown? So where are you now in the status of where it started versus where it is?
Sure. So I think, the important thing is to contextualize that, Jenn, because honestly, what I didn't realize when I embarked on this venture was that I and my tiny team would fight an enormous battle every day, not even to grow Make Love Not Porn, just to keep it going. Basically because every piece of business infrastructure that any other tech startup takes for granted, we can't. The small print always says no adult content. And that is all pervasive. I have trouble getting funded. I couldn't get banked. It took me 4 years to find one bank here in America that would allow me to open a business bank account to Make Love Not Porn. Every tech service that I need to use to operate a video platform, hosting, encoding, encrypting, the terms of service always say no adult content. In every case, I've had to go to the people at the top of the company, explain what I'm doing, beg to be allowed to use their service. Sometimes they let me, sometimes they don't. It's a very labor-intensive process. We never get to work best in class of anybody. And my two biggest business growth inhibitors are, number one, payments. PayPal, Stripe, credit card processors won't work with adult content. I have to work with the murky subculture of adult-friendly payment processors who charge extortionate fees. I pay out 12% of my revenue every month in payment processing fees alone, versus mainstream rates of 3% or less. That's a huge growth inhibitor. And the other infuriating inhibitor is that we are banned from advertising anywhere. We cannot promote Make Love Not Porn on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Google, YouTube, Twitter, I ask you, Reddit, I ask you. And so all of that to say that the biggest thing we have to celebrate is that Make Love Porn is still here. We are small but mighty. And I've worked for 15 years to parallel path two things: working to build Make Love Not Porn and working to change the cultural and business context around it. Because when you have a truly world-changing startup, you have to change the world to fit it, not the other way around. And finally, I'm seeing those barriers fall, and I'm very confident that we can scale Make Love Not Porn to be the Facebook of social sex globally, which is how big I want to be. But right now, we are still small and we are still battling.
That's really amazing. I had not thought about that business aspect of that in that negative space. But, as I'm sitting here thinking, I also, as a podcaster and a, sex therapist, psychotherapist, I see often that I'm limited in some of things I can do with my reach of my podcast because it does have the nature of sex in it at times, but it's educational. This is for the good of people from a perspectives, from healing, from growth. And I too have even seen that in different opportunities for advertising with podcasting or different opportunities for organic development in podcasting. There's a lot of disclaimers that exist out there. Will not work with anyone that talks about that topic. And if I have episodes that don't have that, then that's acceptable. But episodes that do, that's a problem. And it's interesting. And I've already seen that just in my small glimpse of that. So I can't even imagine the much larger impact that has on this type of structure. That's really interesting to even think about the impact of that, because, we're talking about what is healthy. We're talking about healing. We're talking about being sexually free in a way, and not being limited by our own experiences, but yet it's all lumped in together in that subculture that you're talking about.
No, absolutely, Jen. And I'm all about building solutions to my own problems. So we have a whole product roadmap at Make Love Not Porn that is about solving our own problems in a way that will benefit everybody else. So right now, earlier this year, we launched our first ever equity crowdfunding campaign on WeFunder. And the reason it's our first ever is because historically no crowdfunding platform would admit us, But the wonderful actress Jamila Jamil of The Good Place, She-Hulk, she's a big fan. She interviewed me on her podcast, loves Make Love Not Porn, proposed that she lead an equity crowdfunding campaign and brought us to WeFunder. So we are targeting $1 million. We're a third of the way there. We've raised 360,000. But what that's
congratulations on that.
Thank you. Because what that's enabled us to do is we are now building something I've had in the pipeline for 10 years, can finally make happen. And we plan to release a bare bones minimum viable product in a couple of months' time, which is something parents and teachers began asking me for from day one of Make Love Not Porn, the 0 to 18 and beyond sex education expansion, makelovenotporn.academy. So our vision for this is laid out at that URL. But this is what I characterize as the Khan Academy of sex education. Because Khan Academy, the online tutoring platform, tutors on every other topic under the sun except this one. Educational technology, EdTech, is exploding as a category, but not in this area. So we are building Make Love Not Porn Academy on the same principles as Make Love Not Porn, user-generated, crowdsourced, curated revenue share, because this is an aggregation play. I'm not about reinventing the wheel. This is the go-to global hub for the best of the world's sex education content, which includes, by the way, everything you're putting out. And so the game plan is that we're building this platform, and when we take it live, we invite everybody educating and informing in this entire area to share with us their own content. Coursework materials, podcasts, books, comic strips, webinars, or whatever it may be. We will curate. At the heart of everything we do at Make Love Not Porn lies human curation. Our curators will vet every piece of content to make sure it's safe. We endorse it. And we will then publish it so that you can search it by things like age appropriateness. If you're a parent freaking out going, oh my God, my 6-year-old just asked this, what do I say? We'll give you age appropriate content to be able to have that conversation. If you're a teacher of a class of 14-year-olds, here are age appropriate teacher materials. If you're an adult, access all areas for all the information you want. And, some of this will be free to access, but we're also going to charge to download, subscribe, bulk buy if you're a school, buy books, courses, etc. Because the point I always make to people, Jen, is that right now, no one goes into sex education to make money. As we've just discussed, I have a ton of brilliant educator friends. They face all the same problems I do. Yes. Their content gets blocked on Facebook, Instagram. Their accounts get suspended. They're banned for advertising. And I want to change that because this is enormously valuable work. And so I intend the Academy to be a source of massive revenue for every educator and therapist and people like yourself, in a way that is currently being blocked, censored, and deplatformed everywhere else.
I love that. I mean, this is such a bold stance you have with sex, pornography, education, and you're obviously such a trailblazer. I have no doubt that you're going to reach, these goals of where you're going. And it's really exciting to connect with you to understand all of this. I mean, I'm hearing so much technology behind this too. What was your past like before you got to this? Tell us a little bit about, from what I understand, doing some research on you. I mean, your resume is pretty broad and all these things that you've done to now get to this point. And I would love to explore kind of the collection of how all that is influencing where you are now, because you are a trailblazer for sure.
Oh, thank you, Jen. Well, my career background broadly is, 39 years working in brand building, marketing, and advertising.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say that has actually given me the best possible experience of what I do now, because I've spent 39 years working in the business of getting people to do things that they originally had no intention of doing.
I love that viewpoint on that. That's fantastic, Cindy.
So yeah, I'm determined to take those skills and apply them to sex. So I think that that has genuinely been extremely helpful, because I spent 16 years. I worked a number of ad agencies, but I spent 16 years at a wonderful ad agency called Bartle Bogle Hegarty, BBH. And in fact, the reason I'm here in New York is because they sent me here 26 years ago to open up their US office for them, which began as me in a room with a phone, starting an ad agency, the world's toughest advertising marketplace. But BBH's creative philosophy was very much about, again, as my boss, Sir John Hegarty, said, messages, information goes in through the heart, not the head. It's about the emotional sell, not the rational one. Mm-hmm. And so our philosophy at BBH was, we don't sell, we make people want to buy.
I like that.
I'm now working in a particularly challenging area where it's absolutely about making people want to buy. Mm-hmm. And so I'm bringing all of that, ingenious strategy and creative execution to what I do now.
And it is such a creative execution, because you really have to lean on all of your history, all of your background in this project, because this seems like an all-consuming project.
It absolutely is, Jen. It's, as I said earlier, the path appears. I didn't choose this path, but it's the one the world set me on. I'm very glad it did.
Now, I have to go back to what you opened with, because it was great. I think you said that this all kind of also, it comes full circle in a way, because you said you were dating younger men. Yep. And still date younger men. And this is how this is kind of the entree into looking into that, correct?
Yep. And again, Jen, that was a complete accident. Mm-hmm. I began dating younger men by accident. And what I mean by that is, so I was running this ad agency in New York, and something like 22 years ago now, we were asked to pitch for an online dating brand that was coming out of the UK, wanted to take on the American market. Mm-hmm. And in the advertising industry, when you pitch for a client's account, you have to experience the client's product and the entire competitive landscape. So we all had to online date. Mm-hmm. And this was 22 years ago, and none of us ever had, because,
that was the infancy of online dating, for sure. Yeah.
Back then, So the rest of my pitch team at the agency, they were all married, living with, dating. They went online as fake personas. I was single. I thought, okay, I have these business reasons. Why not do it for real? Let's find out what this online thing is all about. So I posted my profile on a bunch of sites, very honest about everything, including my age. Got a ton of responses, which was very good for the ego, but much to my surprise, because I had not originally thought about this as a dating strategy, the majority of those responses were from younger men. And I suddenly realized I was every young guy's fantasy. Attractive older woman, high-flying career, did not want to settle down. I've never wanted to marry, never wanted children. I just wanted to have some fun, which at the time, having just started an ad agency, I was working 24/7. Fun was severely missing from my life. Mm-hmm. So I thought, wow, have not thought about doing this, works for me. And I've been dating younger men very happily ever since.
I bet your dating profile was spot on. And I often consult with people on a dating profile and consult with them to recognize what are you putting out there versus what you're wanting and where is the disconnect. But absolutely, your energy alone, I can bet it was creative and snappy. And I would have loved to have seen that and seen that version of you then, because that can only, I can truly see how that happened completely. And so now here you are, all this time. You said that's 22 years ago. So 22 years now, you're still dating younger men. I love it.
Absolutely. Yep.
I love it. That's wonderful. So, technology is playing this big role in modern sex education. And there are other platforms and things where people have done from a academia standpoint only, not socially, to really promote education. And I do see that path is being forged in the academia world. So to me, the timing is beautiful for this, because I think that convergence is so very possible, where it would not have been possible maybe 10 years ago. But we're now to a much different place. And I think even the advent of how many more clients and people seek out sex therapy in general, there's a much more applicable concept to say, I know that we're missing passion in our relationship. I know that our sex life is suffering. I know that we need help. And that did not happen a decade ago. You know, it was, if it did, it was very much on the down low. It was not something people talked about, versus now it's something that people can be a lot more honest and open about. I think sex in general has shifted in that way. And that alignment, I think also technology catches up. We always think technology is the forefront and the visionary and the innovator, but sometimes I think it's the opposite. I think technology has to catch up to what we think in society. And I think that that's certainly happening.
Well, I would just caveat that with another point, Jenn. Okay, because and this is the context to why I designed Make Love Not Porn to operate the way it does. Because in the broader tech landscape as a whole, the young white male founders of the giant tech platforms that dominate all our lives today, they are not the primary targets, online or offline, of harassment, abuse, sexual assault, racism, violence, rape, revenge porn. Therefore, they did not and they do not proactively design for the prevention of any of those things on their platforms.
Right. Oppression, marginalization is not even a part of it.
And we see the results of that around us every single day.
Yes.
Those of us who are most at risk every single day, women, Black people, people of color, LGBTQ, the disabled, we design safe spaces and safe experiences, but we don't get funded. Only 1.7% of all venture capital last year went to female founders. And that is why we have still not seen what the future of technology can be when it's designed and built through the female lens at scale. I designed Make Love Not Porn through the female lens to be the safest place on the internet, because I designed it around what everybody else should have, nobody else did, human curation. There is no self-publishing of anything on Make Love Not Porn. Our curators watch every video submitted from beginning to end before we approve or reject, and we publish it. No one else does that. We review every post on every member profile. We review every comment on every video before we approve or reject, and we publish it. No one else does that. We can vouch for every single piece of content on our platform in a way that nobody else can. And the important point about this, Jenn, is we are tiny, bootstrapping, have no money, and we've human curated everything for 11 years. Imagine what Facebook, Instagram, TikTok could do with their billions if they chose to. Safety on the internet is not a matter of viability, it's a matter of will.
And I'm hearing, I mean, the amount of moderation that has to go in that, the amount of due diligence that has to go in that, and the amount of work and time and effort, if you're going through that and approving that and making certain it meets those safe guidelines. I mean, that is a massive undertaking.
Well, actually, it's not, because we have an extremely efficient human curation process that's really gotten it down to a very speedy, scalable operation. So on average, and just make the point that, Make Love Not Porn is a real world sex video platform. And so our only stricture for submissions is it can't be less than 3 minutes. But real world sex takes as long as it takes. So our videos vary from 4 minutes to 2.5 hours,
Yes.
But the average video is probably between 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
So our human curation time from our curators vetting all the paperwork, but because our submissions process requires 2 forms of visual ID for every participant, full identifying details, etc. But, make sure it's all legal, consensual, everyone's over 18. But, from vetting the paperwork through, curating the video to putting everything in place is on average an hour.
Wow. Okay.
Because, we were a very streamlined, efficient process.
It is, because, there has to be such a large degree of due diligence to make certain that you're not, contributing to some of that pervasive subculture that exists with sex trafficking and the oppression and of minors and all the things that happen from a traumatic sexual world that are so devastating today, that exist just rampantly. And as I went to the website and looked at it and saw myself, I was really curious and interested to what is the backbone going on here? Because it's obvious the amount of effort and work that's gone into creating this consensual, promoting healthy sex and sex education that's happening here.
Yep. No, and the interesting thing is, Jen, everything I'm sharing with you is the female lens on technology that nobody is funding. Mm-hmm. Okay, but that's the important thing to remember. The future of technology would look so different if female founders were funded at the same rate and the same scale as men. Because at Make Love Not Porn, we take human curation to lengths nobody else has even dreamt of. Mm-hmm. So I said to you earlier that, when people submit videos, we require 2 forms of visual ID and full identifying details, government-issued ID, and full identifying details for every participant, including, by the way, if you've chosen to have somebody else behind the camera. Even if we never see them, we have to know exactly who they are, 2 forms of government-issued ID for them as well. Then, we watch the video from beginning to end. We make sure that, it's legal, consensual, etc. But we train our curators. Even when the video has passed all the paperwork tests, we train them to watch this video, ask themselves, as I watch this, do I feel the camera is in a position where everyone knows it's there? Mm. Do I have a bad feeling watching this video? Because what we say to them is, if you have a bad feeling, you don't have to explain it or rationalize it. You having a bad feeling is enough. We won't publish that video. Mm-hmm. Then, when they've watched the video and we're good with it, we then contact each participant in the video separately. We email them separately to say, we are now going to publish this video. We want to make sure that you've consented, you're okay with that. Nobody else does that, by the way. Mm-hmm. Equally, if you're at all worried about your employer, your college, whatever, it's fine to be anonymous. You can wear masks, faces in shadow, out of frame, whatever you choose. But if you submit a video where you want to stay anonymous, we require you to submit along with it a full face photo of you with your face uncovered, holding your government-issued visual ID up next to your face, so we know exactly who you are. Nobody else does that. Okay?
Wow.
I'll tell you something else.
Cindy. I really like it.
Yeah. Something else nobody else does, Jen, is that our commitment to our Make Love Not Porn stars is, the moment anything changes, your relationship, your life, your circumstances, even just your mind, you tell us, we take your videos down immediately. And what I mean by that is, we have no online form to fill in. We have no application process. We have no waiting period. All you do is you message us, and someone did the other day, within 10 minutes, her videos were gone. Okay, nobody else anywhere on the internet does that. And by the way, what's quite entertaining is, obviously this is a real world sex platform. And so we'll get a message from a couple going, hey guys, terribly sorry, we broke up. Can you take all our videos down? And we go, damn, they were so cute together. 30 videos gone in one fell swoop. But of course we do immediately. Then a few months later, hi guys, we're back together again. and I can tell you, there are some couples with whom that happens on a regular basis.
Yeah. But I love that you have that respect for your clients in that way. I love that you're giving them the autonomy and a sense of agency, that if they don't want that out there, they don't have to have it out there. And that goes back to how obviously consent is so very important to you. And I love hearing that, because I think if more people understood that these are the kind of safeguards that could be in place, then a lot of people would view this entire concept differently in general, not specifically your site, but entire sex education as a whole. And I think there's
absolutely, Jen. And that's why with makelovenotporn.academy, it's so important that, again, human curation lies at the heart of that. Mm-hmm. With educational materials, we undertake that human eyes will have vetted every single piece of content so that you can be absolutely sure it's safe. And what I think is very interesting about this, Jen, is when we take the Academy live, which, as I said, we hope to be able to launch a bare bones minimum viable product in a couple months' time and then be able to build in public. Because the moment we put it out there, and people will see exactly how it's designed to work, and then we can pull in a ton more content. But what I think is interesting about it is, for years, people have said to me, oh, Cindy, you should go into schools. Make love and porn should be on the curriculum. And I've always said, no, I shouldn't, because anyone trying to bring sex ed in schools comes up against parent-teacher association, moral panic, But here's the thing, the people keeping sex ed out of schools don't know what it'd be like if they allowed it in. They just know it'd be really bad. In their heads, they have this abstract concept of Sodom and Gomorrah will ensue. When I launch the Academy, I can show you what doesn't exist anywhere at the moment, which is the best of the world's sex education content all in one place. Mm-hmm. And you can see for yourself at a glance how brilliant, informative, educational, healthy, and non-threatening it is. Mm-hmm. And when you can search it by age appropriateness, cultural sensibility, because we will have Christian sex ed, Jewish sex ed, Muslim sex ed, and when you can pick and choose according to your comfort level, it's entirely up to you what you select for your family, for your school. That is when I can get sex ed into schools. Mm-hmm. I'm building outside the system to be able to get it into the system.
Mm-hmm. That's such an interesting viewpoint. So profound. Wow. I have no doubt that you're going to be success in all of this. You are obviously just on the cutting edge of where this is going to go. And I'm going to be excited to follow along and watch. I love what you're doing. I love the safety you built in for people. I love how aware you are of this due diligence and the consent and everything that's needed in the way to make it to where people do feel safe, because safety is what it has to be about. And absolutely. People also would start feeling safer about sex and understand that there are ways to educate and promote and do that in a healthy way. I think then we're getting somewhere with sex education in general. So it's just been such a pleasure to talk to you about all this. And I'm so excited. I hope more people will go to Make Love Not Porn and check this out and really look at it and understand it. And let's see where you go. You're going to have to circle back with this soon and keep us updated on what happens in this journey for you.
Absolutely. And actually, Jenn, if I can just say to our listeners, if you like what I've talked about, please do go to wefunder.com/makelovenotporn and do invest. The minimum investment is $100. So it's whatever you can afford. And also importantly, this is equity crowdfunding. You're not donating, you're investing. My commitment is I want to add several zeros to every single sum that anybody puts into our WeFunder. So I would love you to go to wefunder.com/makelovenotporn and help make all this happen.
Absolutely. And we'll be sure we have that in the show notes for you as well. Well, as something we do on the Redhead Reveal podcast is the prior guest always leaves a question for a future guest. And it's a really fun way to connect the different topics that we use here. The last guest asked, what's the weirdest thing you've done when alone in your office?
So right now, I don't have an office because we work remotely. But I guess back in the days when I worked in an office, and I'm going to give this answer only because I don't think it's weird, but other people might. But I guess, the oddest thing that I've done when I'm alone in my office, in this case, to be strictly accurate, in my office's ladies' restroom, is masturbated. Mm-hmm. And I bet a ton more people have done that at work than you might think.
Oh, I believe a ton more people have done that for sure, but are probably not willing to admit it. What question do you want to leave for one of our future guests, Cindy?
I think, I would like to ask the next guest, what didn't you do that you wish you had?
Oh, that's a good one. Good one. Well, I can't wait to hear that answer, and we'll circle back with you and let you know what that looks like. Thank you again, Cindy, for joining us on the Redhead Reveal podcast. You were amazing. You're a trailblazer, and I can't wait to see what else you do.
Thank you, Jenn. It's been an absolute pleasure.